Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on Tactical Emergency Response hosted by First Action. My name is Marcus Vaughan and I'll be your host for today. Joined with me today is my esteemed colleagues, Joshua Shields, Joint Managing Director of RiskLogic and First Action and the Catalyst Groups, as well as Rowan Alsop, who is our Training and National Operations and Training Manager. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As you can see, we've got a relatively busy agenda today to get through over the course of the next 30 minutes. But before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. We'll be recording today's webinar, so if you feel it's relevant for your colleagues, we will circulate a link to you after the event so that you can share with your colleagues or just relive your favourite moments. The webinar will go for 30 minutes in total. We're going to have about 20 minutes of content predominantly focused on response technology and a lockdown event, and we'll follow that with 10 minutes of Q&A. You are on mute at the moment, but you will be able to enter any questions using the panel, the Zoom panel there. If you can't see the panel, you might just need to move your mouse around a little bit until it shows up. Type in any questions that you have and we'll endeavour to answer as many as possible at the end of the webinar in the last 10 minutes. Any questions that we don't get to during that course of time, we'll aim to get back to you personally offline. So as you can see, we're going to be walking through what an event, a lockdown event looks like and what we consider the fundamentals of good practice response to look like. Some experience-based insights in terms of what the common blind spots are, as well as a quick demonstration of how Activate, our response technology application, can assist your organisation respond with speed and clarity in a lockdown scenario. To get started, Rowan.
Hi.
Hi. Unfortunate as it is, we seem to be experiencing a lot of lockdown events on a pretty regular basis these days. Perhaps you can actually talk us through what a typical lockdown event looks like.
Thanks, Marcus. I guess, guys, in fact, lockdowns are becoming more and more common on the workplace. Having said that, the most common occurrence at the moment is that you're being told to lock down by emergency services. So a couple of examples recently of that, we look at Footscray, where we had a huge factory fire not so long ago. The first thing that the commander on site, the fire chief, did was jump onto the television and tell everybody remain in place, shelter in place. And that was because of the toxic smoke that was spilling from the fire. Another great example is we had a service station held up in Ourimbah in New South Wales. I said it correctly, thank you very much. So Ourimbah in New South Wales, and all of the business around that area, police actually locked them down. So as far as they're concerned, they said, we've got an unfolding event in your area and we want you to lock down on your site. So it is happening a lot, and it's actually happening, what we've found so far from speaking to our clients, it's actually happening more than fire evacuation. So it's actually quite topical and something that we think is very important for the industry to start spilling out. So in both cases, I guess, that I just mentioned, we can see that that's emergency services instructing us. Now, they're saying lockdown, but under the Australian standards, it's actually known as shelter in place. And in some regulations, it's known the same thing. To clarify it further, what we've done is we've actually broken it down into 3 categories. So for us, as you can see in your slide, we've got shelter in place, we've got lockdown, and we've got active aggressors. So in breaking it down to that, and I'll give you a quick explanation. So active aggressors is essentially your terrorist situation. So when we talk about that, it is your Al-Qaeda, it is your ISIS, it is the IRA's back. Woohoo! Sorry, no, I shouldn't say that. I'm Irish, I can say that. So we've got any recognised, I nearly said registered, you don't register a terrorist organisation, so any recognised terrorist organisation, and it does include essentially your lone wolf in that sense, somebody acting on behalf of a terrorist organisation. The next one down is a lockdown. A lockdown essentially is that we believe the safety and welfare of all of our workplace is at risk. Now that could be an abusive ex-employee, an abusive current, an abusive client, anything along those lines, where we feel for the safety and welfare of all the people in our workplace, we need to lock it down. And then the last one there is shelter in place, even though that is the overall encompassing word that they use in the Australian standards, we say that shelter in place is more for your storms. So it's almost business as usual. Now shelter in place is, nobody out, everybody in. Lockdown is nobody out, nobody in, and we all hide. Active aggressors is the standard terrorist response, which is run, hide, see, tell, which means we run, we find a really good place to hide, we pick up our mobile phones, we dial 000, make sure our mobile phone's on silent, we tell them who we are, where we are, and what we've seen. Whereas with a lockdown, quite often it's management or the ECO, meaning the Emergency Control Organisation, they're the ones contacting 000. So I guess I'm finished with that slide, Marcus. I'm happy for you to go doom. Marcus gave me a hand signal to do, but I'm too useless to remember what the hand signal was, so I'll just get him to flick it over.
With that in mind, Ryan, perhaps you can talk us through what the fundamentals of good practice look like.
Well done. Response fundamentals. So, look, I guess our industry is guilty at the moment of overcomplicating emergency management. So basically we do that to make our clients realise that we know everything that there is to know about emergency management, but we add in stuff that's brought, crisis management, business continuity, and it carries on to business resilience and all the other stuff. Really, emergency management is just that. It's emergency management. So from our perspective, we say that that's what we've got to do, is just handle the incident. Forget about the next stages. Let's just handle the incident. So from that perspective, we've actually come up with, I guess, a plan there that if we simplify the assessment process, if we simplify the assessment process, then we're starting to make emergency management decisions. And that's really what's important. So for us, we have a program that we call Stay or Go. And with Stay or Go, it comes down to this. Every single incident, and hey, good news people, there's only 36 things that can happen on your site. Isn't that nice to know? But every single one of those has one decision to make every time. And that one decision then only has two options. So that option is, are we staying or are we going? So depending on whatever the emergency is, all we have to decide, are we staying or are we going? So what does stay mean? Stay means, well, lockdown, it means active aggressors, or it means obviously shelter in place. And then go means either a full or a partial evacuation. So in talking about activating a lockdown, and that's what our focus is today, so we won't focus on evacuation, but we'll say it's pretty easy to activate a lockdown. Watch your earphones for a second, because really it's as easy as making an announcement. That is lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. So we can do something along those lines, which is fine, and it's an international response, and it's what we do. And we do, if you're in a shopping centre and you hear those three words, that means run, hide, seek, help. That's what it means. Some businesses use a code word. Schools use a code word, for example, so that we can actually get people to lock down there. I guess the hard part for a lot of business is who does this. So is it management or is it the ECO? So I guess I'm just raising it as a nice question, because at the moment, if we're not prepared for it, then we don't know who's going to do the announcement. And then we've got to ask, how do we do the announcement? Is it on an EWIS, which is the Emergency Warning Communication System? Is it on that? Or is it on a PA system that we've got throughout our premises? Is it on our PABX? I'm just showing how old I am saying PABX. Is it anything along those lines? But you really have to think about these things before a lockdown so that you know you can communicate that effectively. I guess that's, the other thing is, do the occupants at the moment know what they have to do if they hear a lockdown announcement? And we'll talk about that in a moment anyway on one of the other slides, but ultimately that just means it's another factor that we have to do. I guess the other side of this is we need to constantly communicate with the ECO team. We need to give instructions all the way through the process, and that's where that communication comes in. It's very hard in a lockdown situation. When we talk about, I guess, evacuation drills and evacuations and whip phones and all the other stuff that we have, that's really easy for us because from our perspective, we can communicate. But when we're in a lockdown and we're all trying to stay quiet, and we're all hidden under desks, etc., the communication becomes a whole different factor. So from that perspective, I guess the stand down is the hardest part. And, people can say, let's do a lockdown now. And then what do? We all walk through the building afterwards and go, okay, everybody, thanks very much. And let's move on. So from that perspective, the stand down for us, we say should be an evacuation as well.
Going through that, Rowan, what do you see as being some of the typical blind spots that organisations might trip up on?
And strangely enough, we've prepared a couple of words on the slide. So obviously procedures is one of the things that I think is a huge in the way thing. Now it can be your best friend or your worst enemy, a procedure. A great example of that is let's take the Burke Street vehicle incident. And I'm talking about the first one where the male drove along Burke Street, hitting many pedestrians, and unfortunately causing both injuries and death. One building on the corner of Burke and Elizabeth Street, so you guys can all figure out where that is now. So they shut down immediately. They shut down on the advice of the ECO. So they locked down and that was it. Nobody out, nobody in. Their first aiders actually went out and still assisted, but that was part of their job as the ECO. One block away where the vehicle was, we had another building that didn't lock down immediately. What they did was follow their procedure, contacted security who just happened to be in Sydney, and then it took 2 hours to lock down. So the result of that was we had staff exposed to that incident for 2 hours before we actually effected a lockdown. So I guess that's where procedures can get in the way. Jumping to knowledge and experience, our problem with knowledge and experience is, you know what, the scary thing is we're finding that people haven't been briefed or trained in lockdown now. If we look at YGen, so lower YGen and below, what we find there is they're all training in this. They're training at schools. So that's great. They're getting training, but then upper YGen and above, they're actually not having training. They're not getting this. So this is all new to them. So effectively what we do is one of our little one-liners is our kids know more than we do, which is a little bit scary. So we've got to look at that and start saying, well, you know, we have to teach our people how to do a lockdown. And in teaching them, it is a bit of a shock to the workplace. You know, I remember over 20 years ago starting emergency management training, as in evacuations. And we had people in those days going to HR going, oh, I'm traumatized. I had to do a drill. My workplace could have a fire. Now imagine what that backlash is when we start talking about lockdowns and hiding under your desk and finding a room to hide in. So it's one of the things that we're just going there. The other thing, I guess, is the communication strategies. I sort of hit on that briefly before anyway, and that is it's very hard to communicate during a lockdown. You know, part of that process is, you know what we've trained our people to do at the moment is we've trained them that every exercise that we do, every emergency exercise that we do takes 15 minutes. And this is predominantly to get people back on the workplace as quickly as possible. But what we're going to have in a lockdown situation, at the 15-minute mark, you're going to get everyone going, is it over yet? Can we come out now? And that's where it sort of heads us into those prolonged events. We've got to be able to communicate constantly, keep people in place, and then obviously keep that communication going, especially for a prolonged event, to keep everybody in place. So I guess my example is probably controversial when I start thinking about a dog, when you first train your dog to stay. And it really is like that. It's like, you know, you get your little puppy, it's sitting there, it's looking all cute, and you're patting it and you love it, and you go, stay, 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 and you walk further and further away. And it really is that process that you've got to go through, that process of teaching them to stay and then getting them to the point where all you have to do is say stay, and they'll stay forever until you tell them they can go again. So controversial analogy, but sorry, Marcus.
Sounds like you need a bag of treats. Thanks very much, Ryan. Josh, you've been living and breathing emergency and crisis response for over a decade now. And more recently, you've launched the Catalyst business, which is really focusing on response technology. Perhaps you can give us a quick run through of Activate, what it is, how it came about, and how it works in a lockdown event.
Sure. Thanks, Marcus. And thanks, Ryan, for your insights as well.
Thanks, Jeff.
And feel free to interject as we go through. So, Marcus, we've built Activate. It's a proprietary technology tool that First Action and Catalyst have worked on for the last 3 years now. And really for two simple reasons. Firstly, it's there to help organisations better manage their emergency response programs. And that's a difficult process when you consider multiple buildings, lots of wardens. It's an administrative burden and a compliance burden that's very difficult to keep up to date. And the second reason we've built Activate is to provide a mobile tool for wardens and ECOs to better coordinate and manage an actual emergency itself. And communications is a key consideration there. There's two elements to the Activate product. The first one is the online portal, which very much underpins the data that goes into the system. And that's all about being able to manage your building information through the online portal, manage and edit your warden team lists and details, and obviously access and edit your emergency response procedures as well, which is often, again, very difficult to do effectively in a paper-based way. So we've got an online portal. It also summarises your compliance to AS3745. So it gives you very good visibility and consistency across your program. We'll focus today, though, more so on the mobile app. And the mobile app is very much designed for your warden teams to very quickly activate the warden team or the ECO when there is an emergency, manage the work areas or the different areas within your building or your site, and then obviously be able to effectively communicate to your key stakeholders as well. It's important, though, to remember that technology is no silver bullet in these circumstances. Activate is a very effective tool and it addresses a lot of the considerations that Rowan's already touched on today. But it doesn't replace, obviously, your training or common sense, and technology does have its limits. So if used properly alongside your usual program, we feel it's a very good complement to what you're doing, and it can have some pretty significant outcomes for organisations in terms of keeping people safe. So I think what we might do is we'll jump in to the mobile app and we'll have a bit of a look at how the process works itself. Okay, so the first screen is our home screen for Activate. Now, if you already have some events that are currently in play, you can obviously click straight into those events. or it gives you the option to initiate a new event or investigate the event itself. So we're going to, for the purpose of this, initiate an event. So we just click on initiate, and it allows us then to select the type of event that we're faced with. And you can scroll through those. There's quite a few different options there. Obviously fire, bomb, medical are pretty common ones. And all we do is we select the situation, and then it asks us what action is actually needed. Do we stay or do we go? So back to what Rowan was saying, are we evacuating, are we locking down, or the other options there? But two simple options, stay or go. So in this situation, we're actually going to stay for various reasons. And then we choose what areas does that apply to. Are we going to lock down all areas of our building, or are we going to select specific areas? So you can do partial evacs or partial lockdowns or full lockdowns very, very quickly and efficiently through the technology. We're going to select all areas here. We can also type a message, which will go out to our full warden team if we choose to. If you'd chosen to go in this circumstance, the assembly area would also show up on this screen, and you could obviously edit that if you needed to change the assembly area. We click on activate now. That will send out an SMS, an email, and an in-app message to all the warden teams in your organisation. You can also access, as a warden, specific task lists that are very specific to your role and the event that's taking place. So obviously the required actions are very different for stay or go, and if you're a chief warden versus a warden or an area warden or a first aid officer. So this is just a reference point for your warden teams, and they can tick those tasks, and it will keep track of what's
I'll just
been
chuck
going on.
in, Josh, just for fun. I love checklists, and then even pilots use checklists because, yeah, they know their planes off by heart, but a checklist just makes you think. So you might have wardens who know what to do and they're great at what they do, but that checklist just gets them going through that thought process. I really love it. Sorry, Josh.
No, that's great, Ron. Thank you. Absolutely. Okay, so we can also access our area logs. So the way the system works is that you can select and set up customized zones and work areas in the portal, which will then flow through to the mobile app. A zone could be a building, for example, or it could be a larger area. And within that zone, we can break that down into what we call work areas. And you can name those work areas and zones whatever you like. So it could be building A and building B, level 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. So in this summary screen, and this is really useful for the chief wardens and area wardens to manage their areas or buildings, we can see the status of that zone, whether it's in progress, it's been completed, or it still hasn't been started. We can also see how many work areas are within that zone and how many work areas have been given the instruction to go versus stay, whether there's any warnings, so if there's any potential issues that have been raised by wardens as well. And we can also see that the bomb threat in this situation here is emanating from Zone 2 itself.
Just chucking in there that emergency services, when they arrive, they want all of this information. So having a summary page is just an absolutely brilliant idea.
Yeah. Now you can drill down into further information. So we're going to drill into Zone 2 here. And we can flick through the different zones very quickly in the work areas. So you can see here all the work areas for Zone 2 and the status of those specific work areas. So again, that could be level 1, level 2, level 3, for example, or you could name them whatever you choose, depending on whether you're a school or a shopping centre or a corporate office. We can see there that work area 9 hasn't been started. We have a warning and they have been asked to stay. We can see that the bomb threats emanated from work area 8. And various other details about the other work areas itself. Now we can also click into work area 8 there, for example, and that'll give us an overview of the key information relevant to that work area. Now that information has been put together based on the wardens participating in that area itself. So you can see there's a number of warnings there. We can see the bomb stay. We can see which wardens have been allocated to that work area. If we scroll down, we can also see any relevant assembly areas and so forth. So just give you some good detail about each of the specific work areas. We can also access our assembly area details, and you can obviously have multiple assembly areas based on your location. So you can select primary and secondary. You can create new assembly areas if the situation requires it. And we can also get directions to assembly areas. So just like your Google Maps, for example, if I click on Give Me Directions, it will walk me to the assembly areas.
If we have a look, Josh, I'll just jump in again. So if we have a look at the latest Bourke Street incident, one of our major retailers that were in Bourke Street, their assembly area was actually 50 metres from where the incident occurred. So obviously they needed to change that very dynamically, and this is the sort of thing that allows you to do that. Terrific stuff.
Great. All right, one of the other key elements of Activate is obviously its communications capability. It's probably one of the single most important things that the system can do. There's two forms of communication in the Activate tool. You can have live chat, so instant messaging between wardens or people who are using the app itself, or you can send SMS broadcast to your key stakeholders as well. It operates very similarly to a WhatsApp or your usual SMS or messaging systems that you would use on your mobile phones today. The important thing here is that you can actually filter your recipients, and this is obviously very important if you do have a lot of stakeholders. You've got a lot of tenants, for example. You can create your own custom contact groups that you can SMS to, obviously, but you can also use the filters to filter by zone and work area, even by the status of that work area as well, or you can select individual people or contact groups to send messages to. That's very straightforward, and you can see here if I just select the key people. If I send out an SMS, it is one-way SMS, so you can't get responses back from SMSs. But the one-way SMS is ideal, obviously, for informing people that they can return back to work after a lockdown situation. It's very useful to send out to, for example, parents, if it's a school, or tenants or retailers, or other tenants or office workers, or all staff, if the situation's been completed.
Sorry.
Exactly. Important to note, though, that SMSs obviously do incur a charge. It's about 10 cents an SMS. For the instant messaging, so amongst wardens and app users, you can obviously send usual messages and create contact groups and so forth and have multiple people messaging within the group. You can also attach images, which would be very useful when you're assessing the situation. And you can attach locations as well if you want to send location to the new assembly area, for example, as well. So it's quite a dynamic communications capability. And you can obviously drill down into individuals' contact details if there's specific people you want to call or email, for example. So Marcus, that's a very quick overview of the Activate app. It does a lot more, obviously, but in the context of the lockdown situation, I think it's pretty obvious the value that it'll create, especially around the communication and activation process.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Josh. We might give an opportunity for people to start asking some questions. As I mentioned, there should be a panel there. If you can't see a panel on your screen, you may need to rapidly shake the mouse a few times until that pops up. There'll be a little Q&A box of which you can go into and essentially ask any questions. I've got a couple coming through. To kick off, I might hand this one over to you, Rowan. How can we get wardens more involved in training?
Good question. Essentially now, as I hinted at before, we've been doing emergency management training for well over 20 years now, and we are essentially just doing the same old, and that's not going to work. I've had wardens who turn up saying, I've done training 15 times and it's the same every time I come here. And to tell the truth, some of them even say it's death by PowerPoint. So I think the word engagement comes in there the most. Thinking about the engagement of the process now, changing the way we do stuff, and part of the stay or go that we do definitely is that engagement side of things, making the decision making easy and then carrying that out easier as well, but then making the training more dynamic. So less death by PowerPoint, more involvement, more practical. And then catering to your generation. So not just our X and our baby boomers, but starting to cater to the lower denominations in the generations and coming up with some nice, engaging methods for them. Part of that, is things like this app where we start talking about it's the now. It's not the future, it's the now. So things like that engage people greater.
Perfect. Obviously, a few questions coming through now. Can you use the app when a bomb threat happens?
You definitely can. Look, I did the Com Games in Melbourne and in India, just for information, folks. The AFP still have on their website, don't use a mobile phone or don't use a radio near a suspect device. So we say near for a start, but then the other side of that is most suspect devices have been exposed to everybody walking past them with devices in the first place. So what we've actually said in there is, you wouldn't use it right next to it, but you definitely can still use it.
Perfect. Excellent. How much does Activate cost, Josh?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we've built Activate to be very accessible and cost effective. The actual app itself is free, but obviously it relies on the online portal itself. And there is a charge for the portal. For a standard, say 15-story office or commercial building, mid-sized building, let's say with 20, 30 wardens, it's around $49 a month for the site itself. So it's basically $500-600 a year is roughly the cost of what it would cost you to put an emergency response procedure in place for that building. So tried to keep it very cost effective. With that comes the app itself, and there is no additional charge for the app except for your SMS usage costs, of course.
Got it. Rowan, this one's for you. How often should an organisation be doing lockdown training?
Oh, look, we know that training should occur 6 monthly at the moment anyway under the Australian standards. But I guess from our perspective, we've been taking our clients on a journey. So for us, we're doing lockdown training and we do a lockdown drill and then an evac drill immediately after. So we're covering off on both points there. The side of it is, and what we've been telling our clients at the moment, is that essentially it takes 18 months to train a site up to a lockdown status. In other words, we start softly. We start with a softly approach using staff awareness, getting the staff into meetings, telling them what it's all about, telling them the reasoning behind it so they understand the journey, and then taking on that journey. And we say at the start, we use just wardens. They actually don't hide. They become monitors and they assist us in the training. And then we go further than that onto the wardens hiding at the same time. We're basically at the end of that 18-month period, we've got a team that knows how to lock down.
Yeah, no worries. Josh, this one might be for you. For multi-site organisations, how many locations can an organisation use with the system?
Sure. There's absolutely no limit to the number of locations, sites, buildings, and wardens you can have in the app itself. It's been built for single-use usage, so single-site usage, all the way through to hundreds of sites. And we have a number of universities, for example, who do have hundreds of buildings and multiple campuses that are using the app itself. So there's no limitations in terms of its scalability.
Yeah.
Probably creates more value for those larger sites, given the coordination and communication hurdles that they face.
Yeah. Okay. How do you manage the information in Activate?
Well, as I said before, that the information gets put into the portal itself. So again, depending on the resources a client would have, obviously, to do so, it's all self-service. So they can jump in and create their own emergency response procedures. They can import their warden team list or enter them manually. They can create their own building profile. So it's all self-managed, which obviously gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you manage that information. Some of our larger clients obviously have specific site managers with responsibility for the emergency procedures for their site. They will obviously use the system at a site level, and then we have an overarching administrator access level as well, where you've got visibility across multiple sites. So it's all self-managed. You can obviously engage us to help you upload your information as well if needed.
So you could essentially have information on every staff member in a building if that information was loaded into the portal previously?
Very much.
Got it. Excellent. Does it work on Wi-Fi or cellular networks?
Yes. So it works on both. Obviously, SMSs is dependent on our cellular network, but obviously, as long as you've got connectivity to the internet, the app's going to work and you'll be able to communicate with your other wardens as well.
Got it. Languages. Has it been translated yet?
Not yet. So it is only English at this point in time, but we do have plans to make it multilingual. I can't give you a time frame on that at this point.
Perfect. Okay. Just having a look through here. Okay, so Chief Warden. So I'm a Chief Warden, had 3 evacuations recently. Logging into the app and sending messages wasn't an immediate priority given the circumstances. Checking your phone during an emergency when there is so much going on, how practical is it?
Yeah, so it is a great question. I guess from our perspective, and we've trialled this, guys, so it's not something we've just made up and hope that it works. Part of the simplification of the app itself is as less clicks as possible. Now, Josh said earlier, we're not replacing emergency management with this. What we're doing is enhancing it. So yeah, there's times that you've got an EWIS board that you're working all the numbers on the EWIS board, and you might be very comfortable running along those lines. What we say though is it's almost the same as having a scribe, and that is you're pressing your actions in when you get a chance, pressing your actions into the app on the phone. Now, I sort of picked up on the logging into the app. It stays logged in. So basically you sign in once and you stay signed in. So you just open the app. You're not logging in every time. And then basically you're running it from there. And for a chief, it's a great communication tool. In other words, you're going to get those warnings. You're going to get those, I've got mobility impaired persons or otherwise, and you're going to get that straight to you. We all know that sometimes, especially using whip phones, etc., that not everybody knows how to use them right. Or let's say they've evacuated their floor and not been able to give a message on a whip phone. What that can then do is this will enhance that by saying, hey, I'm out, I'm safe, I'm this floor. So they're letting the chief know.
And if I could just add to that,
yep.
We have some clients who will never use the mobile app, but but they get a huge amount of value out of the online portal because that's how they manage their emergency procedures and so forth. And we have other clients who get an enormous amount of value out of the app because they do have those communication challenges, especially in the more complex environments where there is no other alternative. And they just simply either don't know who all their wardens are and just can't communicate to them. So as I said, it's not one single solution. It's there to complement, as Rowan said. The other key thing though is that your mobile phone is probably the one thing that just about everybody is going to take with them when they do evacuate or lock down. So it is probably your single best tool available to you as part of your arsenal.